Thank you very much. So this is Reed. I'm the Executive Director of the Dibble Institute, and we have Rebecca Powell, our engineer. Hi, Rebecca.
Hello. Sorry, my computer keeps freezing. Don't worry.
Oh, sorry about that. So thank you for coming to this, I think, very important webinar, and we're thrilled to have some great panelists. We'll introduce them later, but people who are really in the trenches doing the work, and we're grateful for them being here. So next slide, Rebecca. So today, if you can't access, if somehow the audio isn't working on your invitation, it tells you how to call in. We're going to be doing some polls. We ask if you have questions, and this will be a live interactive sessions, to please type your questions in the question box. We also encourage you to type your, what are they called? Tips or guidance, because we're relying on the collective wisdom of the group. And finally, our free, this webinar will be archived on our website so you can share it with others. So for sure, we are not the sole people that are thinking about this. We don't have all the answers, but we have a lot of very talented and inventive people who are moving ahead, and so we're grateful for them being here. So by a show of hands, so the first thing we're going to do is look at your little control panel and look at the hand thing, and please raise your hand if this is the first Dibble webinar you've ever been to. You could please show me how many people have been to a Dibble. Yeah, this is your first one. Okay, great. Well, we welcome you to these. We have these every month on the second Wednesday, and we're thrilled to have you join us. For those of you who have been with our webinars, we've been doing these for about 5 years. We welcome you back, and appreciate that you continue to find them useful in your work. So Rebecca, the next slide, please. So I want to tell you a little bit about the Dibble Institute. We get the name Dibble, not from the gardening implement, but from Charlie and Helen Dibble. Charlie was my youth group advisor when I was but a wee lass down in Redlands, California. And he had he had a penchant for young people. He loved working with young people. And he found over the years that their fortunes, their lives, their trajectories would often rise or fall based on their relationships and based on the relationships of their parents. And in the 80s, he was doing lots of research around this and found that people, while they were studying relationships for young people, they were not actually getting that information to young people. So that's where he started this work with the Dibble Institute. And so today, the next one, Rebecca, the Dibble Institute, last year, by conservative estimates, we reached 85,000 young people with our materials. And when I say we, I mean you, because the Dibble Institute is a nonprofit curriculum publishing group, and we rely on people like you to teach the materials out in the field. So we're really grateful for your help in doing that. And what we found through the years in our evaluations is that when you teach young people to gain agency in their intimate relationships, which is what we do, is you help them with sexual activity, you help them with mental health, you help them with job skills, you help them with to prevent violence. There's all kinds of benefits from teaching relationship skills. So we thank you for doing that and being part of our team. So Rebecca, the next one. So a couple things that are core values. One is that we believe in research. We're big fans of science. And so all of our programs are based in research, and we spend time and energy getting them evaluated because we want to know how they work and why they work and how we can make them better. But it also means, just as science shifts and changes, as more is known, the same things happens in our materials. So how we discussed cohabitation, for instance, 15 years ago is different than how we discuss it today, because we we know more about more of the subtleties and intricacies of that. So it shifts over time, but for sure it's all research based. Okay, the next one. We are super big fans of safe, stable, and healthy families. This is really well documented. It's the best place to raise children. The children need that stability. And so by helping young people learn how to gain agency in their intimate lives, we're hoping that in the long term, we are helping more children be raised in optimum circumstances for their growth and nurturance. Next slide. And finally, we believe that all young people need to be treated with respect. They deserve respect, and all relationships can get better with relationship skills. So we make sure our materials are don't assume the gender of your partner. They don't assume they just don't assume the gender of your partner. And we have specific exercises that are specific to GLBTQ young people. So they're used in lots and lots of locales with lots and lots of young people. So next slide. Today, we have our 4 panelists, but before, to help them out, I need your help. We're gonna launch a couple of slides here, or polls. So Rebecca, if we do the first poll, first we'd like to know of people who are actually here in the room, which program do you teach, or maybe it's neither, and whatever iteration, whatever adaptation of Love Notes and Relationship Smarts Plus is fine. It would just give us some orientation to what you're what you're teaching.
Okay, if there's ever a delay, it's just because my computer's being slow, just so you know.
Okay, great. All righty. So here's the poll. Okay. Many people have not taught one of our programs, and that's great. We're glad to have you along. While we're going to be speaking specifically about implementing relationship smarts and love notes, these tips and guides will probably help you with another program, although we certainly welcome you to check out our programs. We can send you free review copies if that would help. Secondly, let's just get a sense for what your plans are for next year online. Has your district or your organization determined that you're 100% online, 100% in person, or a combination of the two? Okay, so let's show that poll. So just a few minutes ago, I was saying that my favorite word this year is pivot. And it looks like that's what most of you are going to be doing, that we hope we can go back to teaching in person, but we're starting teaching online probably, and it may shift back and forth. So you can start to see that these things happen. It's just going to be rough. We just don't know what's going to happen. Okay, great. Thank you, Rebecca. Okay, so let's introduce Janelle Zachary of Healthy Visions. Janelle, would you like to tell us about your program?
Hi, Kay. Good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening. I have to catch up to speed. Hello, everyone. My name is Janelle Zachary, and I am representing a small but mighty agency in Cincinnati, Ohio, entitled Healthy Visions. We serve a target population of at-risk or high-risk youth, ranging from 5th through 12th grades in the greater Cincinnati area. We do use the Love Notes curriculum, the EBP version, and so we do a lot of extensive work with using the Dibble Institute Love Notes curriculum. We are serving our population with a core area of focus in supplemental education for in-classroom. And of course, with the most current events of virtual lessons via classroom settings. Kay, is this an appropriate time to identify the most important thing we think
Right.
everyone should consider? So We believe that the most important thing that we think agencies should consider as they move their instruction online or consider moving their instruction online, for me, it's a two-pronged consideration. One, and I'll keep it very simple, is capacity. What capacity do you have? And do you have the resources to utilize some of the online programs or apps to implement your virtual programming? Do you have business or top tier accounts to have full access without limits? And are you able to set the time aside to brainstorm how you can effectively implement your material? The second identifier is toolkits and tutorials. And I say that collectively. We are in the business to serve people, but it would be a disservice if we didn't do our homework. So our practice influences the concept of learning by doing. And if we're not in the habits of using the toolkits available or the tutorials of the programs that we're using, then it will impact your capacity and your effectiveness. So those are two important things: capacity and the toolkits and tutorials. Thank you, and I look forward to speaking with you all.
Great, thanks, Janelle. Yeah, I asked every panelist to introduce themselves and then to answer the question about what is the most important thing they think someone else should consider as they move instruction online. Okay, so the next person is Alex.
Hi everyone, I'm Alex Chan. I'm the Mental and Behavioral Health Specialist for the University of Maryland Extension. And our program, if you aren't familiar with Extension, is the non-formal educational wing of the University of Maryland. And recently we've expanded into the world of mental and behavioral health. So I'm technically, for those of you who are familiar with Extension, in the Family and Consumer Sciences program area. So in the past, though, I actually also worked for 4-H, and that's the largest context that I've done relationship smarts plus. And yeah, I actually did one of my, before transitioning to this current role, one of my last relationship smarts implementations back in April when everything was just getting off the ground in terms of, or going into the ground, whatever you call it, when things were slowing down. And I would say that my biggest piece of advice here for considering online education is to be open to live feedback from your audience. And what I mean by that is that, especially when we're teaching young people, teenagers, things like relationship smarts, and we're on all these new systems, they're the digital natives. I mean, some of us are too, but they're going to have feedback about how to do some of the activities better. And you may have put hours of planning into your program, but a 17-year-old may call you out and say, actually, this is the way you should be doing it. And you need to be able to say, okay. And it actually works out pretty well sometimes. So yeah, that would be my advice.
That's great advice. Nothing like the wisdom of the young. Thank you, Alex. Okay, next is Tracy Barber. Oh, sorry, Tracy, I muted you. There we go.
Okay. Greetings from Mississippi. Thank you, Kay, for allowing us to do this with you. We are an agency in Northeast Mississippi, in a fairly rural area, based out of Corinth, Mississippi, but we operate in 5 counties in this area. And aiming for healthy families, we have been, Ms. Carolyn Gowan is our executive director, and she started this back in 2001 with abstinence as the priority. Have done some tobacco grants. We have ongoing tobacco grants, and then a few years ago she teamed up with some other folks and got back into doing grants with abstinence based in the schools. And we serve in over 1,500 students in our area. And when we got shut down in March with the schools, we quickly had to realize that we were going to have to reinvent ourselves if we were going to touch the high schoolers. We serve 9th through 12th graders, but we also, in some of the grants, we serve 6th through 8th graders. And so what you would mostly important thing to consider is, I look at it, well, you've got to look at your agency, you've got to look inside the agency, you've got to see what talent is already there and tap into that talent. What does the team already know, and what do they need to get good at and get good at it fast? And then the other part is the outside. You've got to realize how quickly your schools are going to allow you back in. We are finding now through our learning curve over the last 20 weeks or so that we are ahead of now of where some of the schools are. So we're helping them out now. So find out where your schools are, how really you could serve them. And then one thing is to remember, you already know your curriculum. You're just trying to figure out how you're going to be putting it out there virtually now.
Great. Thank you, Tracy. Okay. And finally, John Lewis.
All right. Yes, my name is John Lewis. I'm with Urban Strategies, and I manage all of our projects in the kind of on the West Coast, predominantly Los Angeles. And so we have a couple SRAE grants, and then we're also have a MITRE evaluation grant, and then a teen pregnancy prevention tier 1, and now we have it's actually a tier 2, phase 2, to evaluate a brand new relationship education curriculum with justice-involved youth that Dibble has been a part of with us for the last 2 years. So I use all of these curriculums: Relationship Smarts Plus, SRA, Love Notes, EBP, and the new innovative approach is called Project With. So we predominantly in Hispanic neighborhoods here in Los Angeles, also with foster youth, and then we're in all of the residential probation camps with the Los Angeles County Department of Probation. So we have all of those have become virtual as of the first week of April. And so I oversee 10 different community-based organizations that are implementing, and then the ones that are also implementing within the probation camps. So when I was asked the question, what's the most important, since all of my projects deal with federal funding, it's the back room. How do you keep track of who's in the room, attendance, fidelity, and all of those aspects? If you run out very quickly, which some of our partners did and fell on their faces and learned the hard way in regards to tracking information, I think slowing down and really having a plan of how you're going to track that backroom stuff is super important, especially when you're trying to collect data, dosage, setting, fidelity, all those different things, having those in place. But my second thing is the most important, and Kay would probably know exactly, that is my biggest advocate within this, is have fun. Figure out how you can make everything fun and engaging within the classroom virtually, and yeah, you're gonna get the kids' attention, and they're gonna stay with you when you're not a talking head and you're having fun with this as we move forward.
Great. Well, thank you all. Okay, Rebecca, would you just go to the next slide really quickly? So we're gonna start our panel conversation. I'd like you to use the question box with your own tips and your questions of our panel. So panelists, let's all put on our cameras, and Rebecca's gonna take down the, let me see if I can find myself. There you go. Yeah, here we go. Okay. So the people in the audience, just so you know, this is Kay. We picked these people because back in April, or March, we started getting calls from our clients saying, help, what do we do? And I'm like the first one to admit when I don't know something, or at least I try to be. And for sure, I didn't know anything about this, and I thought we could really work together as a team. And so if you go to the link for this webinar, there's our Online Teaching Toolkit. It's also on our website under free resources, online toolkits, with lots of tips. But this group who met with us in April, they've learned more in the last 3 months. So we're really super excited to hear what they're learning in the field. So John, to segue to what you just said, the backroom stuff, something we probably don't think about, like we're really more worried about how do I do it in front. So how do you collect and keep backroom items? What do you use for tracking?
Yeah, we already had in place. It's, if you go to airtable.com, you'll see this kind of like online kind of Excel platform. So it's a database that we've built, and you could probably do it with Google Forms or Google Docs or Google Sheets or whatever. But the ideal, the first thing we wanted to do is how do we track attendance? And so we created a link that would come up on a kid's screen and allow them to pick the date, who's the facilitator, and lesson that they're in, and then sign in. But what we learned really quickly is, I think we all know that high schoolers can be difficult, and they can, you know, act like the link doesn't work, even though it does work. They could act like I don't see the link, and how am I supposed to tell them that that you don't see the link? Their perspective is truth. So what we decided to do was, instead of having the kids kind of do that, we said you're going to have a second facilitator that kind of looks at the room and does that form, so they don't have to resubmit it or scan a sheet. So our backroom data people get attendance every day ongoing by having that other person kind of do that. And so if you don't trust your partners, you could also have them do a little screenshot or something of the kids in their room that would validate these are the kids that kind of signed in. And so we had to move from paper also just to survey links, and that becomes a little bit harassing too, because kids can be annoying and say they did the survey, but they didn't do the survey, or they didn't complete the survey, they didn't push submit. All of those things are very interesting. So communication between the field team that's getting kids to do it, and then our analysts that are all working from home in their pajamas to be able to validate every day who did actually take the pre-survey and who didn't take the post-survey, so that incentives and all those different aspects can be done. So we really began to feel like, in collecting that backroom data and fidelity logs and all those things, it definitely takes a village. It doesn't take a village to raise a kid, but it takes a village to raise, to gather federal data. And so I think putting that plan together, and then also being, Kay, what's your favorite word in this?
Pivot.
Pivot. So
Pivot.
when it doesn't work and you fall on your face and it totally fails, you pivot and you say, but you don't throw out the whole thing. You look at which of the little things, like we love the online attendance sheet where like kids can't fill it out. If we want to make an entertaining class, the first 20 minutes can't be an argument about the attendance sheet. That's just not a good use of time. So we pivoted and just said we're going to have a staff person do that, and it made it so right when you get the kids online, they were able to kind of be engaged, and we were able to gather the data and all those things. And so, and then communication between the field team and the analyst people, and then we have an outside evaluator too, WestEd. So all of it's just communication, and validating and checking and just communicating back and forth. I think that's that when I think about that. But whatever you need to collect via your organization, put that plan in place, and before you run out too quickly.
Hey, yeah, the feds want their data, and funders in general. So it's not a, not a bad thing for sure. Any other thoughts on backroom data collection? Or move on to the next question.
We did SurveyMonkey. We put all of our pre and post and did things with SurveyMonkey, and then also Google Forms.
Yeah, we use SurveyMonkey. Oh, someone that was in the kind of think tank before. I'm gonna bring Kahoot up at least 5 times today because I'm sponsored by Kahoot. Is that you can actually, if you pay Kahoot, anytime you do a survey, you could use that as attendance because they actually collect the names. And so if you don't want to do Airtable, or if you want to, if you're going to use Kahoot all the time, Kahoot's another way to take attendance, because all of them who log in and play the Kahoot game, then that you can pull that data, and then you have that as an attendance sheet.
So I'm just going to say we're taking notes on this, and we're going to release not a full transcript, but those people who said, what was that very smart thing that Janelle said, we'll send it to you. So yeah, okay. So here's another question. How do you do role plays online? Or do you do role plays? Is there a place for them online?
Well, when us using Zoom as our video conferencing, you can do breakout sessions, so you can always give them the situation and they role play in the room and then come back and report. We were very careful that maybe we had enough adults to be in each room with the young people when we were doing that. Or you could just pick 2 or 3 and let them role play with everybody there, because you could let them know on this session, when we meet together next time, we're going to be role playing and doing some fun things like that.
So what's a normal class size? You know, in a classroom, normally you're at 25 or 30, but on Zoom, what feels like the right number of young people, if you could choose?
I think
I'll jump in for that.
I can take this one. Go ahead, Alex.
Okay, so I know the upper end, which would be too much, because that's a situation that I dealt with, which was about 40 students online. So that was a lot, just because during some of the games and the activities and things in relationship smarts, for example, the red flags, white flags game, you know, or some of the other games early on, the values auction, there's so many, you know, responses coming in at once that it's hard to manage that volume of people, or to try to watch all of those reactions to things. So, you know, when it was in person, I kind of liked a larger group, maybe over 20, but now I would say, for me, I would say, you know, 15 or so.
Janelle, what do you think?
I think ratios are helpful in this situation. So if you know that you have 2 or 3 people running a call, it's nice to have a distortion of people or a distortion of you for that one adult or facilitator. So for instance, maybe there's per every adult, there are 10 to 12 students, or, you know, if you're feeling froggy, maybe 15. But I wouldn't really do any more than that. One, for the rich conversation or the rich dialogue that we might miss with a larger group, as Alex mentioned before, but also the ability to maintain that classroom engagement and not to lose anyone if they don't find this particular scenario engaging enough for them because it doesn't apply or it doesn't fit to their lifestyle at the moment. So I second some of Alex's sentiments on that.
So it sounds to me, based on what you've all said, that either you need to throw more adult bodies at the project, like someone to take attendance so that the teacher can teach, or more adult bodies to keep the ratio 1 to 12, 1 to 15, or just make it a smaller class altogether, just 1 to 15. Would that be fair to say?
I concur with all of them. And so if you break off rooms, then you can send, you know, a facilitator to each breakout room with the 8 to 10. So we've had people who start a class with 40 altogether, they do raffles, and then they send them to 4 breakout rooms, but there's 2 facilitators in each breakout room. So they're delivering content within that 10 to, I concur with all of them. They, like, no one can handle like 25 high schoolers in a virtual classroom.
Or even in a real classroom, really.
Yeah,
I would add too that one of the adults should be the like, I mean, this may be a no-brainer, but you should have 1 or more adults from like the sponsoring group. Like if you're in a school or in a youth club, like don't let them just say, hey, we're having these guests, and then they're there, but they're not really there. They need to be actively involved. And so that would be, because it's not like having, like if I had, you know, for example, that 40 kid group and there were 3, you know, adults with me physically, that would be one thing. But since it's all virtual, they need to see that someone that's actually feels closer to them is there for the ratio to matter to them.
Okay, next question is on privacy concerns, data protection, confidentiality around attendance. What are you all thinking about that?
Well, if they're in a real classroom, they're going to know they're there. So we didn't think much about privacy as far as them listing their attendance in the chat box. We did have a school district that said, please do not have cameras on. And we had to discuss with them about no videoing, none of that. In our social, we have what we call Zoom social agreements. And we go over that before we start every class, although it's the same thing each time. But we wanted them to make sure that they didn't have any of our lesson show up on Snapchat or any other social media. And so some of that went by what the school districts wanted that we got to pilot with. And then now we're just getting into a new school season, so we'll have to see what their rules and regulations are for us.
So you're in a school setting, so you're tracking the school, but John, you're not in a school setting. So how are you handling privacy or
I mean, you know, they have to have the parent consent and the youth assent, you know, since we have an evaluation group with us, they're going to mandate all of that. The other aspect with SurveyMonkey that we're using, data goes back to a secure site. Airtable's a secure site. But the kids don't understand their ID number, you know, that we use with a WestEd, our evaluator. So we have one of our back-end people, after the kids just use their name in the survey for SurveyMonkey in the link, and then someone besides WestEd wipes it and puts in the kid's ID number so that so the evaluator doesn't know gender, doesn't know name, they're just an ID number. So when they're cross-tabulating information, and so it's pretty much, we also give them, you know, we ask them to have their camera on, but if they don't want to, that doesn't mean they can't be in the group. It's just that we just know it'll be easier that way. And then also we have 10 organizations, so each of those organizations may have their own kind of policies in regards to confidentiality and safety. I think one of the big things a lot of our partners are doing is they're creating Instagram groups to communicate with the kids, so that it's not an adult texting one kid to see if he's coming in or there, but that they have all 15 kids in an Instagram group and they can drop a chat in there. And that's also been able to like drop in DD resources. So it's not like sent to just one individual, but it's sent to the whole group and no one knows who actually, you know, utilized it or not. So that's another safety is creating like Instagram group chats with whoever's in the group, so you can communicate and you don't have to worry if there's any weirdness going on out there. No one wants weirdness.
No one wants weirdness, for sure. What about group agreements? You know, we all, you know, getting up to the easel saying, you know, like everybody's valuable, all word, blah, blah, blah. So, but there got to be different rules for being online. So what rules do you enforce and how do you communicate those? How do you generate them with young people for online sessions?
I think this is particularly one of the best things that you can do before any lesson is state the learning objectives to help set the stage. One, so that the audience understands the nature of the topic that we're getting ready to cover for those particularly difficult topics that we might discuss, but also so they can be aware of those expectations for engagement. So one thing about the group agreements or the house rules or the ground rules is that it's okay to have those on like a shared screen, so they're present every time the youth come in with a little bit of music, so it doesn't seem as like lame or not these again. I think it's also important to remember repetition. So when there is someone who violates the group agreements, you can redirect them back to what we agreed to. And some of those things might, just a few examples, different platforms have different perks and features. And again, as a part of this learning environment, features now were not features back when we started. So for instance, control over the chat box, turning those off for sensitive topics, or turning off the ability to private message each other, showing them how to raise their hand, or using those features as to not talk over one another, possibly using the renaming tool if that is available. So students by a class roster might go by a longer name and they want to shorten it to their more appropriate, socially engaging way. And that will allow for you to connect with them initially as they walk in. So I think setting the stage and having those ground rules is uber important in almost every single day. If not every single day, then a few times a week.
So John, don't you have a rule when you do classes that not to be lying in bed?
Yes, and wear your shirt. Everyone wants you to have your shirt on. You know what I mean?
John, we call that camera ready on our, we have a pictorial one, and from John, we learned that, and so we call it camera ready.
There you go, man. I trained. It wasn't a kid. It was a facilitator. He did the whole training without his shirt on. I mean, he was strong. He had tattoos. I don't know, but we would appreciate it if he wore his shirt. And it was awkward. But so a couple of things that we do ask, especially when you have the group size of about 12 or 15, it's easier we ask them to have their camera on. And a lot of people, it's interesting, we learned this little tip from someone else, that a lot of people say always keep everyone mute, but in my experience, I don't get natural conversation with someone if they're on mute. And so as long as you're in a quiet space, we ask them to stay off mute, like unless you have random dogs and other things going on, obviously, or trains that go by. Who wants a train to go by? You can be on mute. But if you have a good setting or in a quiet place, it's much better, because if I ask Alex something, Alex doesn't have to like figure out how do I unmute myself. It's more like I can have just a natural conversation with Alex. And so we ask that if they are in that setting and we have that group of 12, we can have more of a conversation if everybody's not on mute and they're actually actively having a conversation.
So how do you ensure, so you have these social agreements, like, wear your shirt and engage appropriately, but how do you ensure that students are following through with that?
I put a constant reminder. I'm just always saying, remember, you can talk or chat, and so that people are actually like engaging, and part of the like reticence that people feel in participating when they know that there could be other people like watching them really closely is relieved by reminding them that they could be typing a response as well. So part of usually one of the rules that almost every group that I've done this with says is participate. Like I've rarely encountered a group where one of their ground rules wasn't participate. And so in the digital environment in particular, constant reminders that they can chat just kind of gives the nudge, because you're not looking at anyone, you're not glaring at somebody, but just that little reminder, it really keeps the chat box going. And so if you're giving them that voice, then it's easier for them to maybe actually speak up at a certain point. But you just remind them that it can begin with the chat.
Right. So we have some school teachers on this call today who say, that's all great. You guys say 15 for a facilitator, but I have classes of 35. What do I do?
Pray.
Get a religious life. Okay, that's one option. Okay, what's another option?
Yeah.
Adults on here with you, whereas in the classroom, that teacher does not have that necessary blessing, because we never operate probably less than 2. Most of the time, there's at least 3 of us. You've got someone helping with the tech, you've got someone teaching, you've got someone watching chat. So it takes more people to teach online than it does in a classroom effectively. I know teachers need more people in their classroom too.
Well, and someone just said that she's in a virtual public school, and this summer they bumped up her numbers to 50, which is crazy. I mean, I get, on one side, the administration, but I mean, I'm just wondering, could you get kids who took your class last year to come back in, and maybe could we have peer-to-peer facility? Some room monitors might be older peers or more mature peers who could help.
Janelle had something, I think.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think oftentimes when we're in classroom facilitating, there's always depending on the diversity of the classroom, right? So if it's a 9th to 12th grade setting, generally in larger classrooms, because I've had those in person 40 or higher classroom environments, there's generally 1 or 2 students that seem to be elevated to the point where you can give them the instruction to navigate or guide the group, is what we call it. And so if that is present, or even if there's a classroom full of 9th graders and there's some that just seem to be leading the charge, maybe they can help guide the group on necessary conversations. So maybe that's a situation where you don't have the adult to youth ratio. Maybe that's a situation where the classroom is on all mute, but we're pulling on the ones that have the active dialogue to help guide the group in conversation to advance the material. Chances are they're going to help teach us how we can do this better. And we don't have all the answers, and I know it's a learning as we go along. And so that may be helpful in the perspective of how do I get from start to finish with all of these students and just one of me.
Right? No, it's a real puzzle, and so thank you for that. That's excellent. What about this came up in April when we had this group? How do you manage the home or the setting where the young person is, so that they're not distracted, so that they can focus? What do you tell them? What do you tell their guardians or parents? How do you manage, children, their siblings coming behind them, or dad without his shirt walking past? I mean, what do we know about that?
People don't like shirts. That's what we know about that.
Janelle, what do you think?
I think.
Yeah, go for it, Tracy.
Or Janelle.
Well, that's a part of every like you go through Mr. and Ms. Dibble, every time you have a Dibble webinar, we have to rehash the Zoom social agreement and about people in the room, and then keeping the younger siblings away because of the sensitive nature of the material. And like my crazy son came home after he said he was going to the gym. Things will happen, and but you just kind of keep retraining them every time. You don't assume anything that they remember from session to session.
Janelle?
My mind sort of went on a little bit of a reboot, but I think what's most important, like Tracy said, is the redirection back to the group agreements, but also that invitation. So extending that invitation. Hey guys, you're empowered to go to someplace quiet, your favorite place, back against the wall, invite earplugs, invite forts. You can get creative. It's their space, and we want them to be in a space where they feel security. And if we can invite them to be in that secure space, because virtual learning is an uncontrolled environment, and we have to recognize that we can't secure total privacy. But if we empower that student to go to their safe space or their secure space with earbuds or what have you, or under a fort or under a pillow, as long as they're appropriate, and there's no distracting material around them, that would be suitable. Otherwise, that may be an invitation to have the camera off, but still be actively participating, even though we want the cameras on. That's ideal, right? So we do have tools to help leverage that, because we know that every situation won't be the same.
And for those of you who've asked, we will provide, like I'm sure Tracy's going to share with us her camera ready list, and any of you on the panel who have things that you share with students or share with parents, we'd be happy to make them available to others. So there are some questions. Right now we've been talking about live presentations, and I think that's how most of you do it. But some people are asking about pre-recording sessions and making them available to young people. So what are your thoughts on, and they may not have an option in a school district because maybe they don't want you to use Zoom for privacy concerns. So how are you thinking, or have you gone on the pros and cons of recording versus not recording? And if recording, then how to do it successfully?
We haven't done that.
Right. Okay, that's it.
We go to the first two things. We have to be interactive with the students, and we have to be evaluated for the fidelity and high quality of the grant. So we have just done it that way.
Yeah.
I think in considering pre-recorded material is to also understand that there is no room, there's no ability to explain yourself, right? So if you make a statement that might be medically accurate and evidence-based, there's no way for you to go back and say, this is what I mean, and this is the context. When you're thinking of pre-recording, there may be a situation where you may have to practice and rehearse and rehearse and re-record and re-record until it sounds and feels directly as intended per fidelity. And I know that when we're interacting via Zoom, one thing that I wish I had known then that I know now is how intense the material feels when it's being taught to you. And that's something that I didn't, and that we didn't quite understand starting out. And so also identify that with pre-recorded material. If it feels intense in a live session, it will feel directed and intense pre-recorded without the ability to explain yourself. And so then you may find yourself doing a little bit of work on the back end with additional resources, or invited conversation for how that felt or what that experience was with the youth that you're encountering, or even their parents, because they may be within earshot. So something to consider.
So a couple of people have asked about student home backgrounds, which may not be, may feel like an invasion of privacy, may not be appropriate. And then someone else asked about students using Zoom backgrounds and what any rules. I would think that'd be great. Everybody could be in Hawaii for a Zoom, right? But so tell me what you do about backgrounds.
I mean, I think it's a case by case basis. I don't think we've never tried to set a standard. It's kind of like, if you see that it's inappropriate, you kind of deal with that, because you also have that tech. It sounds like most of us on here have a tech in the room that could camera off someone and then kind of talk to them, so I think it's because I think that with kids too, it's kind of having those traditions agreements, but not having too many, because then that just seems really horrible too. If I'm feeling like I'm kind of trying to go to this more fun experience than a total too many rules can kind of be a turnoff. So it's usually, if something's inappropriate, the kid knows it's inappropriate. You just need to say that's inappropriate, and they're going to be okay with you, and you can control it that way. I think is better than,
I think also it's another opportunity to connect ahead of time with the organization that's sponsoring your presence in their classroom or their environment, to know what their rules are about the cameras being on, backgrounds, things like that, so that you're not accidentally bringing something up for one of the students that is actually totally in line with that organization's policies and whatnot. So it's I would say, especially with schools that are, somebody was saying that they did I think one of the other panelists mentioned being in a different type of school, like some kind of non-traditional school, but maybe I'm making that up, I don't know. If they already have a lot of tech policies in place, then it would be helpful to know those ahead of time. and then you're empowered to operate by whatever they're doing.
Great. So someone asks, what's the optimum length of time for a class? Is it 15 students for 15 minutes, or can you do a whole 45 minutes or 50 minutes?
So we, the lessons within all of these curriculums are right about an hour if you do all the activities and all the different things. And I think what I have trained virtually or whatever is you can do that in the hour as long as you're not a talking head. I always tell our people that we're bringing the circus act with the curriculum. And so especially you got 12 or 13, 14-year-olds, you better like have the good circus act. And the 16, 17, 18-year-olds, you can more have a conversation. You don't need as many circus acts, but we mix in Kahoot, we mix in the wheel, we do scavenger hunts throughout the hour. Because instead of telling kids to stand up and take a break and stretch their legs, you tell them to go find a white brush, and they run around the house trying to find a white brush and come back. And they just did that. They just kind of went around and moved and re-engaged themselves. So I think you can totally do an hour. We have partners that do a max. They do 2 hours a day. And they're very, very explicit interactive. They're very breakout room. They're very like bells and whistles going on. So the kids are having a great experience connecting with their friends. And so I think we first said an hour, no more people, but they've proven, and we were sitting online, we're like, they did it. So we can't say they can't do it. So that's kind of been our policy.
Janelle, what are you finding?
We have actively, and our schools have been out, but what we found is we've planned to 50 minutes with the option of teaching instructionally for 40, with leaving room for breaks and activities, etc. So, it gets really difficult to get through all of the material, especially when you want to encourage conversation. So like John said, it's helpful if you have activities. And I mean, it can help explain so much within a lesson. And again, you can find these tips and tricks in some of the toolkits that are provided. And I know that Kay helped us create and set it up so that it is available. But, if you do have some mature students or youth in your classroom that can help guide the group, you can tell on them for more conversationally directed material that helps you advance through. So I agree a lot with what John said, but we plan to 50 minutes.
Okay, so we're gonna, we have 7 minutes till the end. And instead of the question I was going to ask you, like I said, my favorite word is pivot, I'd like you to answer this question. What are fun things, what kind of fun activities have you found work teaching online? What kinesthetic things you're having kids do? What brings it to life? So if you would each take a couple minutes on that, that'd be great. Let's start with we'll do the same order we came in on. So Janelle, Alex, Tracy, and John. Okay, go Janelle.
I was hoping I'd get to be in behind, but okay. What is one activity you said that engages everyone, or just one activity that we do that's really awesome?
Yes.
Okay, we have, this may be like weird, but we have Jenga. We really love Jenga. We really love it. One, because we're talking about relationships. Two, because the word Jenga is Swahili for build up. And so in the active use of demonstrating Jenga, just with you in front of your audience, just like we are as a panel, you're actively explaining, whether it's a lesson on communication or a lesson on every great relationship starts with you and working on your skills, or if it's danger signs between you and a dating partner, you can actively do so many things and explain the lesson in advance in conversation. So that's something that we really love to do, even though it's multifunctional and multi-purposeful is something that we really love to do, and the students absolutely love it. So do the teachers. So something fun to
Everybody get a Jenga set. Yeah, that's brilliant.
small.
Okay, Alex, what do you do to keep it fun?
So part of it is I try to give whatever can be done ahead of time to the students so that they can come in with things, for example, like the tree for lesson 1, the possible selves tree in relationship smarts. So they come in with that already done so that we are not waiting for them to do things like that. And that helps keep it moving to feel like there's still momentum to the curriculum rather than kind of waiting for people to color things and stuff like that. Another thing that I thought works really well in the digital format from that curriculum is the values auction. And this was a user adaptation. We were doing, I think I was using the chat box to try to capture who bid on the value first. And I was having problems figuring out who actually won because everybody would write me instead of, you know, whatever the value was. But then one of the students said, why don't we just say, you know, the number of the value, and then you'll be able to see when the number changes in the chat box, so that even though I had 40 responses coming in at once, I could see, oh, it changed from number 1 to number 2 with this kid, you know, because it was a shift. So that was a really great online adaptation for that activity in particular. And then anytime you can add in something tactile, this is kind of going off of what John was saying about running around your house trying to find things. One of the lessons involves, you know, taking a break for conflict management. And one of the things I have them go do is get an ice cube out of the freezer. And we talk about how, you know, if anyone's familiar with DBT skills as a therapeutic technique, it's also a good educational one. But it all gets at that managing tough emotions. And one of them is temperature. And so how holding on to an ice cube and talking about literally cooling down, but having that be like a distraction element. And it's fun because they're all just kind of like playing with the ice cube, but they're learning a real skill there that they can go and use right away, you know, taking a cold drink of water, splashing cold water on their face, stuff like that when you're in a really heated situation. So I guess those are my spins on the existing activities.
So John, Alex, we're gonna want you to write all that down, because we want to
Okay.
capture that for our
Yeah.
teaching toolkit. Okay, Tracy,
Sure.
quick.
We decided that since we weren't going to be traveling to the schools, we mailed out care packages. We took like the red and the green beads and then the Play-Doh and things like that. We divided the 13 sessions into 3 care packages, and we would mail those to students. And what student is not excited about getting a piece of mail? And they were like in the little padded envelopes. And so like with the red green bead activity, what we would do, we'd send them like several reds and, you know, a few greens, and we're like, okay, set them on the desk, close your eyes and pick one. So we had them have hands-on activities in their own home as we were doing those lessons. And so we would mail about the activity materials for 3 or 4 lessons, and then we would mail some, and we would include maybe some little happies or note about how glad we are with them with this. And we found the care packages to them worked really well, and they were excited because they'd come on, they're like, and what are these red beads for, and what is this Play-Doh for? And so, you know, they were already involved waiting, oh, well, what's this going to be for when I get online today?
Great, good idea. See, this is why we do the collective wisdom. Okay, John, you're a baseball guy. Hit it out of the park.
Hit it out of the park. Here we go. So Kahoot. You gotta go to Kahoot.com and just make Kahoots. You got jungle music, you got reggae, you got funk, you got like the podium. Kids get to win. They get to learn things. And I'm telling you, I even train adults, and all you ever hear at the end of a week-long training, all they care about is just John ran Kahoots all week. And they come online, they want to do Kahoots. And so we also have like each day a raffle for participation, winning a Kahoot, winning the scavenger hunt. They get tickets, and each day they get someone in the classroom is going to win a $20 Amazon gift card. and that keeps them engaged and wanting to stay till the end and all those things. And you probably spent $20 on food when you were in person, so give them $20 gift card. Don't save it for yourselves.
There you go. Thanks, John. Okay, we're going to wrap this up really quickly. Let's turn off our cameras and get the screen back on, Rebecca. So thank you, everybody, for attending. We will post this. We will put the information in our online teaching toolkit. You can email me, kreed@dibbleinstitute.org, if you'd like a review copy or you have questions about anything that we went through today. So a big shout out to our beloved panelists. Next month, please join us, or maybe the next one is, let's see, Rebecca, what's the next slide? Oh yeah, stay in touch, all the normal things, but mostly subscribe to our newsletter. It's where we give out funding ideas and we tell you about the webinars. And then lastly, next month, we have Dr. Ted Futras and one of his extension agents talking about Relationship Smarts Plus, both research and practice, what they're learning, how they're doing it in Georgia. So we're super excited to have them. And again, thanks to our panelists and thanks to Rebecca and thanks everyone for attending. We'll see you next month. Bye-bye.